the best of the week on Relevant Radio.
Joining us from the Twin Cities, it's Jason Adkins. He's Executive Director of the Minnesota Catholic Conference, representing the bishop's interests at the state legislature and more there. Jason, good morning. Always great to have you along.
Glenn, it's great to be with you. Thanks for having me on today. Funny bumper music, given our topic.
Yeah, absolutely. Sarah does a great job with that. Got to ask you, how's your brackets looking, right? No, don't answer that. That's fine, because we're going to talk about online and sports gambling, how it has become really a mess, a very popular thing. I know in the state of Minnesota, it's something that we've held off on so far legally, but there's lots and lots of pressure for that. And, going to weigh in on what the bishops think about that and how good or bad that can be for us. And just to start out, my wife had a coworker who ended up losing a lot, not just any given bet, but ended up homeless. I mean, he lost his home, his car, his job, and was still placing bets after all that stuff had happened. That's how addictive and pervasively evil that can be when it gets out of hands. How big and how bad, Jason, is the problem right now?
Glenn, Americans will bet $3.3 billion on the NCAA tournament through legal sports betting platforms across the country. That is an increase of over 54% over the last 3 years. So sports gambling continues to explode. In some states, it's moved to online casino gambling. You make the point that, we have NCAA tournament brackets. You and I can make a bet. That's not per se immoral. We have these, you and I can make a bet on a game, but what we're talking about is online sports betting. You're taking some of the most addictive features of the cell phone, which we're learning about across a bunch of different contexts, how problematic that is. And then you're combining it with gambling, which is super addictive, with the promise of money and money returns. We think this is predatory capitalism at its worst. Minnesota is one of 11 states, for example, that has not legalized online sports betting. There's going to be a big hearing on that today on the Senate floor here in Minnesota, along with legislation related to both prediction markets and sweepstakes gambling. So this is a big sleeper economic justice issue. The Popes, Leo and Francis, have been adamant about this issue and the way it's harming families, it's harming young people. 60% of young men ages 18 to 22 have made sports bets. 30% illegally have made sports bets between the ages of 11 and 18. This is an emerging problem that has serious negative impacts, just like the ones you described.
Now, talk in general, even before we get to the online stuff, but about gambling and how that's increased over time and how addictive that can be even before you put in the technology of the smartphone.
Well, that's right. I mean, anytime you're, especially in a difficult economic times right now with rising prices, the popes have linked it to payday lending. So you're giving people the opportunity to make a quick buck, especially people in difficult circumstances. And so people want to get out of debt. They want to better their station in life. They want to be able to afford things. And so once you start getting into it, though, it's that dopamine hit. There's a psychological dimension of gambling. It's that dopamine hit that, oh, I want to win. And so that's why things like prop bets, where you're betting on particular outcomes in games, are particularly dangerous, because once you start and then you lose, then you want to recover your losses. And then the excitement of that hit and then the need to recover your losses, and it just multiplies and compounds. So it's dangerous as it is. It's always been considered a vice. It's been limited to places like Las Vegas, where you had to go there affirmatively. You had to be able to say, okay, I physically need to go someplace and make a bet. But once you put that sports book, for example, on your cell phone and give people access to gambling 24/7, that's when it really explodes. And then we have to think about how these online companies are using the algorithms, not only in their betting platforms on the odds of the games, but in the way in which they manipulate your behavior by providing you incentive cash. For example, they know your habits. They know what you like to bet on. So they use all your personal data against you. Over 95% of people who put money into online sports betting platforms come out behind. So fewer than 5% actually come out ahead. Some people say it's as low as 2%. So these are state-sponsored consumer fraud schemes. Just really, really irresponsible policymaking. And now states are having regrets since they legalized it in 2018 and are starting to roll back some of those policies that allowed widespread sports gambling.
Well, one of the arguments for it is that people will say, well, the states are missing out on all this tax money. And it turns out there really doesn't end up being that much tax money, is there?
Well, let me give you a perfect example of that. In the proposed bill in here in Minnesota, there's a 22% tax rate, which means if you do the math, they're, first of all, predicting billions in revenue here in Minnesota. Minnesotans can't afford a multi-billion-dollar wealth transfer to international gaming companies like Flutter, which owns FanDuel, for example. We're struggling enough here economically with a budget problems here in Minnesota as well. But you're exactly right. The 22% tax rate doesn't go to the general fund. It doesn't go to enrich the state or use it to pay for things that have socially beneficial value. It actually gets redistributed among gaming industries or gaming platforms and things like even charitable gaming, for example. And then when there's a little bit of money for gambling addiction, there's a little bit of money for youth sports to give it the veneer of respectability. But the state does not benefit. In fact, we bear the cost not only in regulating it, but the social harms that are created from it: bankruptcies, addiction, poverty, you name it. It's a really a bad bet for the states.
Well, do you end up, as far as the downside of this for society, again, individuals, like I mentioned that example off the beginning there of a former coworker, my wife, who lost his home, lost his car, ended up losing his job, and was still betting even after that. And, speaking to the addictive nature, but it's, almost in terms of the effects on society, kind of the same thing almost as a drug addiction, where it takes so much away. It puts people in poverty. It leads to more crime as they try to escape that, and just wrecks a whole lot of things.
That's exactly right. There's no socially beneficial value to having widespread gambling in our states. Again, it's preying on people's their impulses, and it keeps feeding them more and more opportunities for their own financial ruin. We know that, among all kinds of types of addiction, suicidal ideation among gamblers is one of the worst. So like you said, Glenn, there's really no socially beneficial nature to this gambling expansion. At the same time, we bear so many harms from it as well. So then people say, well, why is it advancing in state capitals? What's going on with that? Well, this is like I said, $3.3 billion alone being wagered on the NCAA tournament. Think about the broader spectrum of all types of things on which people could be wagered. There's serious money behind this. Wisconsin just legalized online sports betting last week. The number of lobbyists and campaign cash that flows through this issue is just enormous, and politicians have a hard time saying no. But the good news is, Glenn, that one of the reasons we've been able to stop it here in Minnesota thus far, and I hope it will continue this session, is just by having conversations with legislators and the public and closing information gaps. And Catholics can play an important part in their states by stepping forward, recognizing the harms of this, speaking to their elected officials, because most elected officials have no idea what's going on. They think, well, people should just be able to spend money how they want. But this is a consumer fraud scheme. It's not like you and I are just making a bet or a wager on something, like I said. And most people have no idea about the addictive nature of the online dimension of this and how these predatory online gambling platforms actually work. So it's the work of all of us, not just the state Catholic conferences or the bishops, to step forward, talk to our legislators, and tell them no, because the legislators think this is inevitable. They think everybody wants this because they see polling put out by the industry. But the reality is that once, like you said, everyone's got a story of someone they know who's really suffered from a gambling addiction. And we got to keep telling those stories and informing our legislators and putting grassroots pressure on them to say no to this and indeed roll it back in states where they have widespread gambling.
As Catholics, we're taught to stay away from the near occasion of sin. Is this one of those great examples where, just a little bit, I don't do it too much, or it's only for this game or this tournament, but can lead us gradually closer and closer to real trouble?
Well, that's exactly it. And like I said, fewer than 5% of people who actually play on these platforms come out ahead. So not only is it a near occasion of sin, it's financially irresponsible as well. And again, people say, well, it's just fun, and we should allow people to have fun and spend their money how they want. But I don't know many people who can cover gambling losses. And so again, is this really a responsible act of policy making, putting this out there and being a near occasion of sin? I think the advertising is super problematic. I mean, you're trying to avoid a near occasion of sin. You can hardly watch a sports event these days without it being bound up into gambling. so cynical is this industry is that they buy the sports networks like they have here in Minnesota, FanDuel Sports Network, which used to be Fox Sports North, because they hope to one day, once gambling becomes illegal, turn it even more into an all around-the-clock betting platform. You already see that on ESPN, which has its own betting platform, where half of the shows now are talking about gambling odds and the gambling dimension of each sporting event. So this is really dangerous. These companies are perpetrating it, and it's time for Americans to step up and say, no, we don't want this. Stop the harms of this problematic predatory industry.
Well, in the world of professional sports and even NIL for college now, when college athletes maybe not undeservedly can get a piece of the pie as well. So there's always been, beyond just pure athleticism at work in terms of sports in the U.S., but we've seen scandals with pro coaches and players and college players. Is there concern amongst the leagues that this will taint the competition?
Apparently not, because MLB, Major League Baseball, just got into a big contract with Polymarket, a prediction market betting platform, which operates like sports betting. We're seeing college athletes, though, threatened because of the way in which they've ruined a money line on a game. More and more athletes do not like it, even if the leagues themselves are jumping into this in a very cynical way for the short-term profits of it. But athletes themselves, I think, are really souring on sports gambling and what it's done to both the competition, the integrity of the game, but also their personal safety as well. I really encourage people to read the article in The Atlantic by McKay Coppins about his year as an online sports gambler and what that looked like and how that played out. That's a really, really great piece in The Atlantic. My Year as a Degenerate Sports Gambler by McKay Coppins. Other places to go to learn more about this issue, stoppredatorygambling.org. But if you're in a state Catholic conferences, if you're in Minnesota today, go to our website, mncatholic.org. Take action under our Action Center to oppose online sports betting.
That was the Best of the Week on Relevant Radio. The best way to listen to the Best of the Week is on the Relevant Radio app. Free and always free. Download and share the #1 free Catholic app today in the App Store.